You are listening to the US of NA, a series of stories about the founders and innovators shaping the non-alcoholic movement from every corner of the country and beyond. For a full library of episodes, go to usofna.com or make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Are you a brand looking to find enthusiasts nationwide to collaborate with and get liquid to lips? Or are you a fan of NA beverages open to sharing free samples with your run club or community group, or maybe getting paid to do in-store samplings? Then sign up at irlnation.com, the industry's first platform aimed at creating in-real-life partnerships in the category. Again, that's irlnation.com.
I had sent her an email early on to see if she would consider doing the art for the cans. And it was one of those moments in life where you remember you're standing somewhere, or, when you remember being where you are somewhere, you hear something or you read something and you remember right where you're standing. And for whatever reason, I remember the moment I read the email back to me, I was standing in the park with my kids and I was just kind of like, yes, this is the whole brand, like her art on the front of these cans, like this is it. It's just one of those moments.
All right. That was Laurel Harrop on the moment in which she realized that Chambers Austell, who was an artist she really admired, had agreed to do the can art for her new brand of non-alcoholic beers called Busty Lush, which obviously was a key moment for her in starting the company. Welcome to Season 2 of the US of NA. I'm your host and chief optimist, John Eggleton. As some of you may know, Busty Lush is a non-alcoholic drinks brand that started in 2021, originally with a lineup of 3 NA beers, and later expanding to ready-to-drink mocktails, which launched last year. We started our conversation with Laurel with a quick dive into her pre-Busty days, where she learned a lot about starting a company through her original venture in the lighting industry. We then talk about the origins of the brand, including the inspiration for the name and personality, and how that's been such a key part of keeping the brand competitive in a market where there has been a lot of investment since she started in it. That includes leaning into partnerships with others in the NA space that have helped the brand punch above its weight class a little bit. Laurel also breaks some news on what's in the works as far as new offerings, in addition to some exciting developments on the business side for her and where she wants to take Busty Lush next. Here's our conversation. All right. Laurel Harrop is the founder and principal of Busty Lush, a non-alcoholic brand that champions female empowerment that she started back in 2021. It started in non-alcoholic beer and has since expanded into ready-to-drink non-alcoholic cocktails as well. She is a serial entrepreneur through and through, as Busty Lush is not the first company she has built, but is a continuation of a personal entrepreneurial journey that has been a theme of her career. So, Laurel, thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome to the US of NA.
Thanks, John. That's quite the introduction. First of all, I want to say thank you for that. That's very kind.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us, and you have been on our short list since the beginning of our podcast a year or so ago when we got started. And I think yours was one of the first brands that I encountered when I first started getting into NA beers a couple of years ago, when we started at our local NA bottle shop, as many people do, and saw Busty Lush and thought it was a really interesting brand. So I'm really glad to have this conversation.
Well, thank you.
Awesome. So as I mentioned at the top, I know that you have been an entrepreneur prior to Busty Lush. So we'd love to start there and just have you talk about that a little bit and what got you interested in being an entrepreneur so early in your career, and how did that, draw a line for you into the world of non-alcoholic drinks?
Sure. So I went to school in San Francisco. I was a cross country and track runner in high school, and that kind of, I guess, led me to San Francisco because I grew up in Wisconsin. And so I, studied business at the University of San Francisco, always wanted to be a business owner, I guess, even as a child. I had various little businesses like selling eggs for my chickens and, like smoothie businesses, tried to start a fashion line, various things. So I think I was always wanting to do entrepreneurship. So I set off to study business, ended up moving down to San Diego, and kind of right out of school had a story that's nothing exciting that leads to entrepreneurship, but basically was presented with an opportunity in a scrap metal type business, recycling lights. And so I was open to it. I think because I'm, I guess, entrepreneurial in spirit, there's nothing that I would shy away from doing. And so this idea was brought to me. And so I learned all about lights and the components in lights and how you recycle a light and scrap metal. And I was doing my own research on the side and started reading about these big street lighting conversions that were happening. And as it worked out, there happened to be this very large one going on in San Diego, and it was 35,000 lights. That project more or less launched this business for me. And so, similar in a way to the non-alcoholic movement, I entered into this recycling business because there was a technology change taking place throughout the country, and I saw it as a niche market, and I was like, I'm just gonna jump into this and do it and figure it out. So, this dated technology of streetlights they were called high pressure sodium or low pressure sodium lights. They can also be called a Cobra head, and that's the old street light you used to see on the streets a lot. And so this technology was essentially being completely replaced with LED. So I started the business in 2011. I've been doing it for about 14 years. So for the first 5 years of the business, I had a facility in Northern California, and then a facility in Southern California where I live, and then a satellite location in Memphis. And we did some really incredible high-profile projects for several cities and utility companies. I guess the one that I was most proud of was for Pacific Gas and Electric in Northern California. We processed all of their 170,000 streetlight fixtures across like a 70,000 square mile service territory, all through our Stockton facility. So, and I enjoy logistics, and that business really helped prepare me for Busty Lush, I guess. I didn't know that I would start another business. I didn't know that I would, move away from doing the recycling. I do still do it today, but Busty Lush has very much taken over my life here. And yeah, so I restructured this recycling business in 2016 to be a company that I could operate remotely. And then what I do now is I plug in local recycling companies to do the work we used to do so that I can manage it from the top. And we don't have any facilities anymore, no more employees. Made it so that I could do this at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's interesting as you describe that because I think there's a lot of NA entrepreneurs who, like you, started off doing something completely different and, were in a different world and, discovered NA for whatever reason and have gotten into it and may either still be doing that other thing or, have moved completely into whatever they're doing on the non-alcoholic side. So I think a lot of people can probably identify with you and what you are doing or what you have done there. And it's also interesting to hear maybe some of the parallels, even though it's a very different industry. You mentioned recycling, as compared to the trend of non-alcoholic drinking. So it seems like there was at least a little bit of a common theme there.
Right. Totally. Yep. And you just learn so much, I think, in your first business. And then even if it's a different type of business, you carry over what you learn and then you learn all these new things. So all of it is valuable, and, I wouldn't trade it for anything, how it started.
So what got you into the NA world? I know you started with beer with your first launch before going into the RTD cocktails that we'll get into a little bit later on. But what drew you in?
So my story, it doesn't start with the sober founder story. I was pregnant with my second kid, and I was sampling what was out there. So this was 2020, 2021. It was a very different time for non-alcoholic products. And so I was just looking for whatever I could find. Like, what can you have that, is like a non-alcoholic beer? Like, what's okay to drink while you're pregnant? And I couldn't find much. And I was like, this is such a miss in the category. Like, I'm not drinking right now. There's tons of people who don't drink alcohol. My grandpa has been sober for years. I watched him drink O'Doul's all the time, and I only ever saw him drink O'Doul's. So for me, it was more maybe the business mind in me was like, this is an opportunity. This is a category that needs more. And I was unaware that movement, the sober movement, was just starting to take off. So I happened to jump in this, not because I knew that, not because I was aware of it, but just for my own personal need of seeing that there was an opportunity there. And so, I got that idea. The true story of it is that my husband owns a brewery, a craft brewery of his own. I said, why don't you make non-alcoholic beers? You should make non-alcoholic beers. They should taste really good. There should be more options out here. There should be these other profiles of flavors. And they could be really great. And he had absolutely no interest in it. And so I was just like, it's just one of those moments where like, fine, I'm gonna do it myself then. And so that's kind of where it began. He can write really great beer recipes. Obviously, he has that background. Beer is complicated, as you know, if you're not a home brewer, you're not a brewer. That expertise is very valuable. So I got him to help me write these 3 recipes. He, of course, did the majority of the work. I can't take credit for the recipe writing side of that, but I wanted there to be like 3 core beers, right, that we could have. So a blonde ale was initially the one that launched it. Then I was like, there should be a summer beer, like a nice sour. I love a good sour beer, and then I wanted there to be a stout for winter. And there's no, the stout category, the NA stout category, always there's just so many opportunities there still. And so yeah, that's kind of where it began. And I just went for it. I had sort of an idea that I wanted it to be very female focused. And that's kind of how it started.
No, that's great. So let's talk about the brand a little bit, and the name Busty Lush. So I have witnessed at sampling events where your beer is being sampled that, it just catches people's eye. I think they see the can. We'll get into the can art and that stuff as well in a minute here. But just the name itself, I think, just causes people to want to pick it up and wonder what it's about and take a look at it. So I was just curious, what was the inspiration of that, or, how did that all come about?
Yeah, sure. I can say this about the name. The second it was mentioned, I was just all in. I wanted the name and the brand to speak directly to women. I guess that was my take on it. And what I loved about the name was that it was super bold and it was a little edgy and it was supposed to be entirely for women. So at the time, I thought I would just be making non-alcoholic beers, and the mocktail thing hadn't come into play yet. And so the name and the brand was supposed to be more of a splash in the world of craft beer, since craft beer was and still is so male dominated. And, this was 2021, like I said, and the NA category wasn't where it is now. But if you look at the craft beer or the NA beer space, you'll still mostly note that the female is the minority,
Right.
And so this is something I guess I have somewhat enjoyed in business. The other business being definitely not a traditionally female space as well, and I have fun with that. I take some pride in that.
No, it's interesting. I mean, the whole, I guess what I would call lifestyle brands, and in my own career, I've always gravitated toward that when I had the opportunity. And the non-alcoholic category, especially on the beer side, maybe a little more so on the spirits and wine side, where it's a little more about the romance of the product. But beer, maybe because it is so male dominated, or has been, there just hasn't been as much personality, I would say, in that category. I mean, the only other brands, I think, besides yours that come to mind when I think of lifestyle would be maybe like a Kitty Pig, if you're familiar with that. And, that, which ironically is another female founded brand that, I see Kitty Pig, I know what it's about, the music industry. It's, I would almost compare it to sort of the Liquid Death of the
Yes.
non-alcoholic
Yeah,
beer
yeah,
space. And then, and Mash Gang would be another one where I think just the kind of edginess and the beer culture, and, there's a different, there's a set personality there. And what I think you guys, or what you have done so well with Busty Lush, is, there's that personality that I think comes across in a pretty immediate way. And I know that there's a lot of things that factor into that, like the can art, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about. You've got the merchandise, and, there's just a sense of lifestyle. I'd love to ask you a little later on about, some of the co-promotions and things that you've done with other brands that you want to align with, that I think fits into that. But there's sort of a personality and a uniqueness to the brand itself, and would love to hear how some of that came about.
sure. Yeah. And I love that you see that, first of all, because and the fact that you say that means that maybe you nailed it on the head, and that was kind of the goal. I did want the brand to have a lot of personality and to have flair, and like the beauty and the captivating can art was honestly an initial part of the inspiration. The artist is Chambers Ostel, and she is based out of Charleston, South Carolina. And she was a huge part of the vision because I was always a fan of her art and, was just familiar with it at the time. So I had sent her an email early on to see if she would consider doing the art for the cans. And it was one of those moments in life where you remember you're standing somewhere, or you remember being where you are somewhere, you hear something or you read something and you remember right where you're standing. And for whatever reason, I remember the moment I read the email back to me. I was standing in the park with my kids and I was just kind of like, yes, this is the whole brand, like her art on the front of these cans, like this is it. It's just one of those moments. And so as far as like the photography and the lifestyle aspect of the brand goes, it all sort of unfolded in like sort of circumstantial and somewhat subconscious way. I happen to be like a interior design and home renovation fanatic. And so in my spare time when I'm not doing these businesses or, with my kids, I really enjoy interior design, and I've done a few houses. And so this brand concept came together during COVID, which also caused some delays. But I had been doing two projects simultaneously, more or less. I was building this idea of Busty Lush and the Blondale. And at the same time, I was working on renovating and designing my house in Palm Springs, which, of course, happens to be pink. And the house, if you've seen kind of in our photography, is like the backdrop in all the photos. It has like the leopard statues and the bright pattern wallpapers. And so the two concepts seem to merge all at once, and it's almost as if like Busty Lush became this person who lives in this pink house in Palm Springs, and they echoed one another, and they have to this day like continued to inspire the branding concept. So kind of a weird story, but like that's kind of how it happened, and I was sort of glad for it.
Yeah, no, now that I know the interior design background, the interest, that definitely tracks. And I would totally imagine that Busty Lush lives in Palm Springs in a house like that. So I could see all of that. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the beers a little bit. So you mentioned, you started with the blonde, and then the sour beer and the stout as well, to kind of round out the portfolio before you moved into the mocktails. So and by the way, I've had all three of those. For those who have tried Busty Lush or maybe haven't, they're all three fantastic. I'm not really sure which one I would count as my favorite. I think the first one I had was the blonde ale. And I'm not really a huge fan of sours normally, but that one really hit me. It's a great, summer drink, I think, as you mentioned, and the stouts I've kind of come around on as well. So that's a really good one for anybody who has not tried them yet. Are there any plans to expand beyond those original three? I know you've moved into the mocktail space that we'll talk about, but just curious if you've thought about doing any kind of seasonal brews or anything else with the beer side of things.
Yeah. So I think there could be a new beer in the future. I'm not sure if we would add something seasonal, honestly, but I will never say never. I guess when I think about adding a new beer to the lineup, I'd love to do like a lager or an IPA, or maybe even switch up the fruit profile in our kettle sour. Like right now, I'm really motivated by the e-commerce possibilities, like Amazon, with just a lot of the data we're tracking, with variety packs. So I think if we did another beer, it would be more likely to add to the core lineup. So it's just hard to maintain SKUs on a platform like Amazon if you have inconsistent stock issues. So, when I look at the business part of the brand, I think we add a beer, we'd keep it there. And instead of bringing these beers kind of in and out of stock, it just makes things difficult. But for now, we have this other new line going, which I haven't touched on yet, which is where kind of my focus is going to be this year.
Oh, well, let's hear about that.
So I wasn't going to share too much about it. I don't want to spill all the beans on here, but it's going to be. It's not a RTD. It's not a mocktail. It's going to be in the realm of adaptogens. I'll say that.
Okay.
I won't spill all the beans here yet. I don't want to. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing a little bit more about that. Um, No, that's really interesting. Back to the beer side of thing, you mentioned IPA and lager, and as you well know, I mean, there's so many NA IPAs out there,
Yes.
and so I imagine that's got to be a struggle. It's such a popular flavor, popular style. That's why there is so many of them, and there's some advantages to making an NA version of an IPA with the hops and everything. But at the same time, you've always been so unique, and starting without an IPA, I think, is another thing that I hadn't even thought about before, but it's probably another thing about the brand that's maybe a little bit different, is you have three beers and none of them are an IPA. So
Thank you.
so
That's entirely intentional. So I appreciate that you noted that.
So let's talk about the mocktails a little bit that you came out with. I believe was it last year or yeah, that's what I thought. That it was 2024 launch. So I'll let you introduce or talk about those a little bit. And I'm curious too if you're finding that that's the same customer as the beers or is it a different customer? I imagine there's some overlap of people who just enjoy the brand, but I'm just curious if you are seeing much of a difference in terms of who's drinking one versus the other.
Yeah. So we have the three mocktails now. We started with the lavender margarita. Then we launched our grapefruit paloma. And then just this last fall, we brought on the hibiscus and chili mezcalita, which is the first one and our only product that we have that has adaptogens in it. And that kind of like got my wheels spinning. As soon as we got into that, I guess that's where the new stuff is headed. So I think yeah, I do think we brought in a new customer, adding the mocktail line, and but definitely there's definitely a lot of crossover with just people who like both. And as much as I love beer, it's still something I think that I see the men actually post more about than the women. The men that do like our products, and I think our mocktail line really hit home with our core customer. Women seem to gravitate to the mocktails. Ours have that pretty appearance with the bright colors, and I hate to call them girl drinks, but they're pretty girly. And I think I get most excited about the mocktails because it opened my eyes to these other ideas around the functional, low calorie wellness type drinks. And that's what made me want to go back to the drawing board with the mocktails. And this part I'll say on here. I What we're gonna do is we're gonna modify the recipes for all three mocktails now, and we are going to add adaptogens in so that all three are more of a functional mocktail.
Okay. Yeah, you kind of preempted my next question, which was going to be, what's next for the line. So, the obviously the hemp derived space is totally blown up. I would say even in the last 6 months, it feels like it's sort of gone to another level in terms
Mhm.
of interest. As a lot of states have finally started to settle out on the legal front what they're going to do about it and whether they carve out exceptions for beverages or not and how that's all working. So curious if that's a space that you guys are looking at and maybe beyond that. I mean, what's interesting to me and a lot of other people is the fact that when you start talking about functional beverages that are non-alcoholic, it really opens up a lot of different doors and avenues that maybe go beyond the traditional adult non-alcoholic or adult beverages or adult beverage occasions. And so will we ever see a Busty Lush coffee or some other type of beverage that may not necessarily be an adult occasion?
Yeah, that's interesting. You never know. Yeah, that hasn't crossed my mind yet. I don't think that we'll ever dive into the hemp space. Just personally, I don't go there, and so probably not. But with the new line coming out this year, that will be more adaptogen focused. I don't know exactly what month we're going to launch that, but I'm super excited about what we're doing, and it's going to be something that'll move relatively quickly. And I'm not sure if you know this about Busty Lush, but I think that you do, John, that I've been bootstrapping the brand since 2021 and I kind of do this all on my own, which is a lot. And I wanted to grow this thing on my own and I have a tough time relinquishing control over things. I think in general that's a personal character flaw. But long story short, this is probably going to be a big year of growth and change for Busty Lush. We're in talks with bringing on board our first investor, and so I'm hopeful that this totally amazing person is the one. She's very much in the public spotlight, and we have some really cool ideas for where we can go with Busty Lush if she does officially come on board. So that's going to be big news and super cool. I can't obviously talk about any of it yet, but hopefully, when this comes out, it won't be official yet, but maybe.
No, well, that's super exciting. You're just breaking news all over the place here.
Yeah, I know. So don't say too much about that yet, and that could totally fall apart. But I think that's the direction we're moving in here. We had an amazing conversation with her just this week, and so fingers crossed on that one. It would be really exciting.
Well, we definitely look forward to hearing more about that as well as the adaptogen drink. So lots of Busty Lush news coming up. It sounds like. Yeah, to follow up on that, I mean, just because again, I think a lot of other NA entrepreneurs and a lot of NA brands out there are going through or have gone or maybe are about to go through some of the same iterations that you have. I mean, we've heard that it's so important on the investor side. And I think this is true of most categories or most businesses, but maybe more so in the non-alcoholic space, to have somebody who can really be not just somebody with a checkbook, although that's important, and that's, you need an investor who can help you get to that next level of growth. But it also is so helpful to have somebody who can really understand the business, understand what you're trying to do, and be able to help you do it justice as you grow that brand beyond just, yourself and, people that have kind of helped you get to a certain point as a bootstrap business, as you mentioned. So just as you were trying to identify someone to be an investor, I mean, what were some of the things that you were trying to look for in that relationship?
Yeah, you make a super good point, and that was all of it for me, because I've been thinking about it more seriously over the last year. When you're small and you're not funded, it's so impossible to compete with the big guys, on a real level. And the longer I did this, the more I was realizing that. But I wanted to get the brand to a certain place before I went out and found this person. For me specifically with Busty Lush, I wanted to keep the 100% woman owned. I wanted this brand to stay woman owned. So I was hoping I could find, like you said, a strategic partner. Really needed it, not just money. Someone could throw money at me, and I don't know that would necessarily do enough. And a checkbook is not going to do enough to go where I want to go with it. I think a strategic partner, whether that be somebody who has a big audience already, or it's somebody who's already, like you said, done this, been either in CPG or had a different beverage company and has grown and has these relationships, that they can bring to the table. But it needs to be a partner who has something to offer besides just money. And that's what I would say too. It took me a long time to get here to be ready to do this. And I found somebody that I reached out to her, and she's just a very great fit all around. She brings all of those things to the table. Plus she's somebody that I would be proud of representing the brand.
No, that's great. And I would say too, I don't think it's a character flaw that you want to do everything yourself. I think that's most entrepreneurs, and myself as an entrepreneur, I think that's something that we all deal
Yeah.
with. And you want to get it to a point where you feel comfortable bringing on other people or other partners. There's a period of time where it just maybe has to be something that you make all those decisions, and need to get it to a certain place where you're ready to take that next step and ready to scale it. And that's really exciting that it sounds like that's where you are with the brand now.
Right. Well, thank you. I know. I hope so too.
So as we start to wrap this up, one other question which I alluded to before was the partnership side, and I'm assuming this is partially, related to the bootstrapping end of things, where marketing. I'm sure you don't have it or haven't had an endless marketing budget to spend to try to find new fans of the brand and get cans in hands, as they say. So I know that you've done a lot of co-promoting with other brands, and that does fit into, I think, some of the lifestyle and design aspects that you were talking about earlier. So would love to hear you talk about that a little bit, and how that's been a key part of getting Busty Lush to where it is now.
Yeah. The cool thing about the non-alcoholic space, at least to me, is that it still feels small, doesn't it? Like it feels like most of us are connected. And there's many of us that have been here for a few years and do support one another. And there's just so many cool brands and bottle shops in the space, and they're run by super great people. And I guess I've loved joining forces with them for those giveaways or for festivals. It's nice to get creative with them because you're right. You share followers. You can do these things that get people excited, like just the giveaways and whatnot. But we can all help one another grow in the space by sharing and by being creative. And everyone here should have that same motivation, because that's what we want in this sector, is for everybody to keep being successful and to invite more people into it and like really see it grow. Like if this is a movement that we want to take over, it's going to take all of us pushing it. And so, yeah, I guess that's the big part of it for me. I really enjoy, Amethyst, is one we worked with, and Jess from over at Drink Joyous, and her and I've known each other since kind of the beginning of where we started. Who else? Like Kava Haven, and just some of the bottle shop owners. There's just like a lot of great people. It's been wonderful.
For sure. Now, there's a definite camaraderie, I would say, within this space, and hopefully, as the space continues to grow, that won't get lost. That is something that I worry about. I know others do too. That everyone is in this together and trying to support each other and to really help build this movement, as you talked about, to get more people on board with it. Which I think things like Dry January are exciting, not because we're not doing this the other 11 months out of the year personally, but we know there's a lot of new people who are giving the category a look for the first time in January. So it's an opportunity, I would say, to a lesser extent. The same is true of Sober October. So there's these time periods where you can really get in front of a new consumer group, which is exciting. But then there's this core group of people that are, that are there 12 months out of the year. And, if you think about the majority of people who are in the category who also still drink alcohol, it's just really exciting to think about what the possibilities are there.
No, absolutely 100%. I wonder when there's going to be a statistic on how many converts there are from these dry months, because that's how a lot of them get started. I listened to I just blanked on Tom Holland, right? With his new beer, his new NA beer. But his story, right, is that it started with Dry January, and then he saw, wow, this is really hard, and wow, this scares me. I need to change, and so he's one of those. But you hear so many stories about the converts that come out of Dry January, and you're right. That's where this grows, where the movement grows too.
Right. No, it'll be interesting to see how big this Dry January is compared with others. I saw, someone was suggesting that maybe it won't be as big as past years just because there's so many people who are in the category now, whereas in years past that was the introduction. But I think you're right. It's definitely it's still a big month for the category and getting more people into it. And I think the more people like the Tom Hollands of the world, as they get in there and use their platforms to talk about it. I mean, he was on the Tonight Show, right, when he
Yeah.
launched the brand, and drinking Barrow with Jimmy Kimmel. And I mean, that's exposure you really can't buy unless you're him.
Yeah.
So yeah, you think about all the people who are watching that show and seeing that are like, all right, Jimmy Kimmel's pretty cool and he's drinking a non-alcoholic beer. So maybe I should check that out next time I'm
Yeah.
in the liquor store or whatever. So it
100%.
definitely grows from there. Last question I have for you, which maybe is an interesting time frame to be asking this, would be the look ahead question. So, as you look ahead to Busty Lush and what you'd like to do, and you've been a brand now for, I guess, close to 4 years, what do you want the next 4 years to look like, or 4 or 5 years, in terms of where you want to be as a brand? Do you have goals around distribution or, products, or, however you want to define that? We'd just love to hear where you want to go next.
Yeah, I'm hoping to bring Busty Lush. We would love to be in all 50 states. That would be a big goal for the next 5 years. We'd like to get in the sky. That's my dream. We have a cool conversation going on right now, so we'd love to see that opportunity happen. We've been working on that. There's a big brand that I'm chasing as far as my e-commerce goals are concerned. And I super admire this brand, what they've done from a business perspective, and that's Recess. Oddly enough, it's amazing to see their numbers and just what they've done since 2018 when they launched. They're a big mover in the non-alc space that I admire. I do. And so, I look to them and think that, hey, that could be us. We could do stuff like that. And so there's tons of retail partnerships that we want to make happen across the country. And we're in talks with one of the big nationwide grocery distributors that would truly open up a ton of doors for us. So I guess that'd be it. Just keep expanding the footprint. Keep it, we'd like to get into Canada. So there's a good list of things, but it all is involved in just expanding and growing.
Great. Well, it sounds like 2025 is going to be a pretty big year for the brand. That's what we're
I hope
hearing.
so. I hope so. Yes. Goes
No,
quick.
they do. They do go very quick. Well, lots of good things sound like they're in the works for you. So we look forward to hearing on the news front what's happening there, and on the product front, we'll be on the lookout for some new versions of those mocktails with the adaptogens, as you mentioned before. So that's very exciting. And again, really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. And like I was saying before, I think there's a lot of NA entrepreneurs who are in your shoes, or are walking behind your shoes, really, who are maybe newer brands that are coming up. And so I think they're inspired by you, just as you may have been inspired by others in the space, or just others in the business world. So really appreciate you coming on to share your story and talk about what's been important to you and where things are going next.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks so much for having me on here today. I appreciate it.
All right. I want to again thank Laurel for sitting down with us. That was a fun conversation and really glad to have her on the show as we start a new season. Speaking of which, we don't want to give away too much ourselves, but we've got some really exciting guests coming up for you across the full spectrum of non-alcoholic drinks, including beer, spirits, wines, and of course, THC beverages as well. So make sure to follow us wherever you listen to stay in the loop. And until next time, stay warm out there.